Okay. Thank you, Allison. So welcome coaches. I want to first off thank you guys for joining us. For most of you, it would be your lunch hour, and you're probably busy doing other things. So thank you so much for taking the time today. As I just said, we're going to take the 1 hour. I'm going to, let us go at 1 o'clock. I know we all have busy lives, but I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to spend this hour with us today. Um, so what is today? So hopefully you can see up on my screen there. This is the run up to the St. John's 2025 Jeux de Canada Games, which this one's an exciting one for me. My first Canada Games as an athlete was in 99 in Corner Brook. So this is, the next time that it comes back to Newfoundland. So very excited. We also have some coaches on the line. I see a couple Newfoundland coaches on the line, which is super excited. It's exciting, sorry. So what is today? Why are you here? So we call this the Coach Enhancement Series. We started doing this for Atlantic Canada here at the Sport Institute. We started offering this for Atlantic Canadian coaches in the last Canada Games round. And we started about 6 months out, and it was really, we'll say, jam-packed. It was a lot of information for the coaches with only 6 months to go. So what we did from that is learn and hear that we really need to help support, prepare, and have an opportunity to chat with our coaches well ahead of the games. And so what we're going to do here is, if you look around online, you can now see everyone's name. Everyone on this call is from Atlantic Canada, and we're all coaches or people interested in coaching at the games. So we have a lot of similarities even just coming into this room. So we're going to have some fun. If I can get to my next slide, 1 second. There we go. Okay. So welcome to all of you to be here today. What is the series going to be about? So this is the first of what is going to be 3 sessions that we're going to run with this whole group and anyone else that, joins us along the way. So we did suspect this would be the smallest one in that many of you may not even be named yet as a coach. You'll be hopefully soon named or interested in trying to be named as a coach. And then there's other sports that aren't quite there yet, and they'll be naming their coaches over the next couple months. So we'll be offering today. We are recording today so that if you have an assistant coach or someone in your organization who maybe is missing today, send them the recording afterwards and they can get filled in on this information. And this is going to be the groundwork of sort of what are some things to think about? We're 18 months out from the games. What is this games thing? What is it all about? And then what we're going to do is try and help prepare you as you move closer to the games and have conversations within this group of coaches so that Atlantic Canada can have the strongest performance that we can moving into those Newfoundland games. We're hosting here in Atlantic Canada. We have a very strong group of sports and coaches, so we really want to support this group. That's what this series is about. Today, we're going to focus mostly on team selection, getting ready as you move into selecting your teams. And then our next session will be in September, and then there'll be another one 6 months after that, which will be just about 6 months out from the games. Okay, so there'll be 3 of them. You are at the first one. Who are we offering this today? So that's an old picture of myself on the screen. So I'm Natasha Johnson. My sport was snowboard, or I say was. I still do coach snowboard, just not the same I used to. I'm the coaching director here at the Canadian Sport Institute in Halifax. I've done this for 6, I think almost 7 years now. But prior to that, I was a full-time snowboard coach. I've coached at 4 Canada Games. I've been there as an athlete. One of my Canada Games, I was actually coaching softball. So I've had the opportunity to coach both summer and winter games. So for all you summer sports, I have been to a summer games. It was a really awesome experience, and way to go picking a summer sport. I'll tell you, as a winter sport coach, so uncomfortable. Summer's hot, yes, but it's not freezing. So I think you're all smarter than I was picking winter sport as a professional. So we're gonna help you, use some of our experience plus the experience of others that we've gathered and try and just help you have the best games experience that we can. We also have Allison Saunders on the line. Allison, give a wave. And I had a beautiful photo of her to put on this that I asked her for yesterday, and then I forgot to put it on. So that's my bad, but you get to see her on the screen this morning. So Allison is our community coaching lead at the Institute. So she'll be here to support as well. She'll be a Canada Games coach herself, and so I'll be leaning on her for multiple things. And then you also have some of your provincial coaching representatives on the line, which I'll be referring to later. But if you don't know, like I see Lynn Boudreau on the line for all of our PEI coaches. I see Gabrielle Kim on the line for all of our New Brunswick coaches. For those of you in Newfoundland, we have Doug. And then if you're in Nova Scotia, you're probably talking to Allison. So who do we have here today? So there's a couple names that don't have your sport and province. I'll just ask because we'll take a look through. So it looks like we have a good mix of sports, which is fantastic, and a great mix of the 4 provinces, which is also super cool. Allison's trying to take attendance. So if you don't mind putting in your full name, if you didn't already, and then throw in your sport and your province. And if you haven't looked through the list yourselves, take a look at who else is online, because this is this little community that we're going to try and connect a few times before the game. So you'll start to recognize some names. Okay. So you can use your annotation or using, I forget what it's called, like a little smiley face or hand or whatever you want on Zoom right now. I'm going to ask who has done the Canada Games coaching module, the NCCP Canada Games coaching module. Anybody? You can put it in the chat too. Yeah, Lynn's done it. Mark's done it. Gabrielle. Okay, well, 2 of our provincial coaching representatives, that's positive, and 2 others. Okay, a lot of people don't know this module exists. So I am going to start with promoting this module as, if you're going to do anything between now and the next time we talk, definitely get this module done. So this was created, I don't exactly remember. It's been done in the last 2 years. It is a great little module. It's not going to take a ton of your time. But if you've been named as a coach for the Canada Games, or you're seriously considering, do this first. So it's going to give you an overview of the Canada Games. If you've been to multiple Canada Games, like I had been to 4 games as a coach before I did the module, it was still a good module. So I'm going to recommend you do it regardless. And maybe there'll be something new in it, since the last time you've been to the games. If you've not been to a games, this is for sure your starting point. So hop on there and do this module. It is free. It is on the locker. So how do you find it? It's a good way to get used to your locker profile. You go to your locker and you go up, and this the picture I put on here, which we will share these slides, kind of gives you a bit of the navigation. So you go up top to the e-learning, and then you go to multi-sport, and you should see it listed there called Canada Games Coaching. What it covers, the history of the Canada Games, pre-event planning, so it touches like a tiny little bit of, what we'll talk about today. Talks about your travel to and from the games, which is really important to go through. It talks about event and team management, the Canada Games competition, sort of like what to expect, what does it look like, and your post-event evaluation. So important one to go through. It takes about 45 minutes or an hour. So again, kind of could do it on a lunch. And it really goes over how this differs from other events that you've competed at. So I'm going to make the assumption there's some coaches on the line that if you haven't been to Canada Games, you've at least been to maybe a national championship, Eastern championship, or an Atlantic championship. And this really highlights how a Canada Games multi-sport experience is different than a singular sports, even national championship. There are a lot of pieces of it that are quite different. So this goes through the basics of that. So for those of you who've not been to a games, and even those who've had, what did you sign up for? So especially if you've just been named as a coach, what are you in for? You're in for a wonderful experience. There's nothing quite like a Canada Games. It's really fun. It's an exhausting final few months. And the week at the games is very exhausting. It's bucket filling and bucket draining all at the same time. So it's a unique mix. It's an experience like no other sporting event you've been to. So if you haven't been to a games yet, I do fully believe this. And I've been to World Cups. I've been to World University Games. So I've been to other multi-sport international games. I've been to lots of national championships in different sports. And there's just something special about Canada Games. It's Canadian and it's multi-sport and it's done very well. And the pride within each of the provinces and the fact that you have the sports mixing, it's just a really unique experience. So it's something very cool that that isn't recreated at anything else. It's going to be a test of your planning and communication practices. And those two things are what we're going to kind of focus on today is what is your planning looking like and how are you testing your planning? And what does your communication look like and how are you testing and making sure that that's the best it can be? And I'll say as we go, if anyone wants to drop questions in the chat as we go, totally fine. You can also hold them and I'll stop a few times. So whatever's easiest for you. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys using the chat a little bit just to start. So we're going to jump right into selection because we have a lot to share on this. So quick show of virtual hands. Who has finalized their teams? That's what we expected. And I kind of hoped. So that's why we're talking about it now. And this is just making the point as well. This is why we're starting 18 months out because for most of you, you're probably just starting to think about what is my selection protocol going to look like? Again, some of you might not even be formally named yet. So you're not even at that point. And that's totally fine. For those of you who are named as a coach, starting to consider what's my selection going to look like? What could it look like? Have you done this before? If you've not done this before, also to finish, we have example selection protocols that we can share with you after if you're just starting and thinking like, I don't even know where to start. Or if you've done this for one Canada Games round and it didn't go how you wanted it to and you want to tweak it, like those are some of the supports that ourselves as well as your provincial coaching representatives can offer you. I'm going to start with, this is the longest video clip that I will probably ever play in a session like this. It's 5 minutes long, so it's long. But it's a very good 5 minutes. So we're going to spend 5 minutes listening to Francis Karen. So he's 2023 PEI Canada Games ringette coach. And he took a team, he'll tell you a little bit of the story, but I'm only playing 5 minutes of it. So he took a team that wasn't the best players in the country, and he created a selection protocol and a way to support those athletes that led them to a fourth place finish, a historic finish at the games for a very small province in a team sport. So I think it's important for all of us to hear this. And I want us listening to, what was his approach and how did it lend to the success that he got. So I already have this one open. Alison, is that showing his face now?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, I'm gonna hit the audio and then mute myself, and Alison, just speak up if it doesn't transfer perfectly. Right.
And so I knew if we were going to do the exact same thing we always did, we would get the same result. And so we had a information session in April of 2022 to start our process after I had my 3 assistant female coaches as part of our team. And we decided we were going to do something completely different. We were going to have a 15-month tryout period where we were going to try to be the best at getting better in Canada. Because I knew I couldn't out-talent teams, but I could out-team them. And if I had enough depth, we could outwork them, because I think that's a characteristic of the Atlantic teams, is that we're just really, really hard workers. And I saw that come through watching Corey's team, because there wasn't too many of your games that I missed watching on the live stream while I was recovering from my week there. But that 15-month tryout period, we set the goal of being the best at getting better in Canada. And what we tried to do is do some unique things. And so one of the things that we did is that part of our trial protocols was that we were going to use quantitative numbers as much as we can, give our athletes as much opportunity to improve their skills so that we had a tough decision come at the end, because it's better to have to make selections based on ability versus trying to fill the last 3 or 4 rosters. So we purchased a set of Brower timing gates, and all our speed, quickness, and agility were done right down to the 100th of a second. We took those on the ice and we did our speed, our 10 meter, our 30 meter, our agility movements, and had it all right down so that the players could see their progress over those 15 months. And those players who wanted to work, we set them up for success. We hired a skating coach and put on a variety of skating camps so that they could improve their technical abilities. We hired Shannon McCauley to work with us through the Canadian Sport Institute at the time, and then she moved out to Calgary. But everyone in our tryout pool was able to get the Team Builder app, and if they wanted to work on their skills to build their speed, power, and agility, we provided them with the tools to do that. we as coaches, we purchased a variety of shooting tiles and softball nets. And through the off season, we would travel to all the different communities on PEI where there was ringette. And any of those players who wanted to come out and get technical advice on how to improve their shooting velocity, we had a radar gun. We tracked that. We built some specialized nets with different targets where the rings would stay in. And so we got testing on kind of our accuracy of shooting. And so we built this whole program on giving the athletes the tools to get as best as they could. Then we created the series called the Athlete Circle, and where through the entire summer, one night a week, we would do tactical training so that everybody would have key understanding of how it was that we were hoping to run our team, so that when we got into special situations, different games against different Canada Games tryout teams, everyone would have a similar understanding and we could evaluate them based on that. We also created what we call the intelligence circle, where every tryout we had a list of questions that were based on the rules, based on tactical things, and we would see how the players could compete and kind of learn and build on kind of what they knew. And so at the end of that 15 months, we had created a rubric where everyone got a score out of 100. And most of them were quantitative measures, because in team sports, there's a lot of times you got to kind of figure out those qualitative things, but we wanted as much of it as possible as quantitative so that we knew the numbers. We knew the athletes who were working hard. We tested them 3 times through those different series throughout that 15 months. And then our coaching staff and our evaluation staff, what we did was we watched all these athletes with the regular teams in season and had a whole book on each player based on what they could do. And so by the time we got to our selections, we knew exactly what we had. We knew the players that were putting the output in on their own time, who were attending certain things, and we felt really good with our selection. And so kind of that was the first piece. And it was something that I think was kind of unique and novel from our standpoint anyway, because I've watched the selection procedures of PEI teams, and usually it's kind of a short window, let's get our team picked and move on. Whereas we kind of went with the philosophy, I'm going to try and work with our assistant coaches to make as many players in PEI better than what they are, so that when it comes time to selection, we have a hard selection. And it proved to work really well for us, because that set the platform for our final 8 months push to the game. We picked our team in July of 2022, which Ring at Canada does 4 hubs. So they bring all the Canada Games teams together, all 9 provinces who have Canada Games Ring at teams. And we had 4 events leading up to the Canada Games where we saw all the teams. So in July, we had our team actually play against training team members from the other provinces. And then after that, we made our selection.
Okay, sorry, I'm a little slow with this. There we go. So I just want you guys to throw into the chat. Did anything come up? Were there any like keywords that you heard while he was speaking, or anything that came up that kind of made you take a note or take a listen? What were sort of the key points? You guys can unmute if you want to and say it, or throw it in the chat. Anyone want to share? What came up for you in that? Making more players better in PEI. Yeah, totally. Intelligence circle, the 15-month prep and giving supports. Yeah, it is amazing. And that's, Sarah, that's a good point. That's why I wanted to share that clip. Love the focus on building depth. Yeah, he really helped the sport, not just creating one team that is going to go to a games. Fraser, love the focus on developing players over the months. Yeah, yep, totally. I do too. So yeah, that's exactly what I wanted you guys to get out of that video. I find that 5-minute clip is just so powerful, because it does highlight, he took the 15 months, he focused on player development, and it wasn't just putting out a set of criteria and then, hoping to find athletes. Like, he put the work in and he got a really great team out of it. So you guys are all more than 18 months out, or 18 months out. So what a wonderful time to sort of give yourselves the ability to do something similar if you want to have a really awesome team at the games coming up. All right, and I can share that clip with you guys as well. The link is in this already. Okay, I just lost my thing. Okay. So now we're going to get, a little deeper into selection. So that 5 minutes kind of gives you some of the key points. But what we're going to look at now are what are the different types of selection type? What are the highlights of them? And really, there's sort of three general approaches that coaches take, teams take, national teams take when they're setting up their selection protocols. So there's a mostly or fully quantified approach, qualitative approach, and then a mixture of both. And you heard Francois touch on this a little bit. So what's the quantified approach? So this is one where you're choosing your team solely based on the results or other measurements, allowing you to directly compare the athletes. So you're trying to get a sense of apples to apples. So in the example from Francois, he spoke a lot about, trying to find ways to get these numbers so that he could compare his team members apples to apples. So I want you to start to think in your sport, what are some measurements that you can use to compare apples to apples or athletes to athletes? I threw a picture on here. This is Sarah Conrad. She's a two-time Olympian from Nova Scotia in my former sport of snowboard. But this is a gym example, not a snowboard example, because for a sport like ours, so if you start to think like some of the acrobatic or, not A to B sports, how do you measure and compare athletes in like a judge sport? Like it can be very difficult. So we often use strength-based measurements as one of our quantitative measures because we can say, well, this athlete is, has more power than this other athlete or has a better jump height than this other athlete. And therefore we hope that they'll have a better performance. So trying to figure out in your own sport, what are the things that you're able to measure? For the A to B sports, guys, have it good. You have ready-made measurements. But for many of the other sports on the line, and I find especially the team sports, starting to think about now, what could that be and how are you going to measure it? How are you going to stay consistent with that measurement? That is a big struggle. So how are you going to set it up now and not change it for the next 18 months? Ideally, like how you're measuring it, keeping it consistent, because if you're not keeping it consistent, you're not able to use those numbers. You're not able to compare those apples to apples. So then we have some selection protocols that I've seen that are mostly qualitative, and you could have a fully qualitative selection process if you chose. And that would be choosing based on characteristics or things that are not easily measured. So some examples might be commitment, might be team attitude or like attitude coming to practice. It could be coachability, could be some of those sorts of things. So things that are super important. They are super important and they can make a huge difference on a team, but they may be harder, not impossible, but harder to directly measure, say with numbers. Then you can have a mixture. So the mixture of both, option C, kind of gives you the ability to directly compare some pieces of it, like measuring two athletes, while also giving the flexibility to incorporate desired qualities like your coachability, commitment, etc. I want you guys thinking as you create these selection protocols about appeals as well. So basically the goal of your selection, like I lost my words right there, but if you have a very, very solid selection protocol, you're not going to have any appeals. So starting to think now as you're setting that up, like how sound is this? Could someone appeal this? Are there any aspects to what I'm looking at that could be seen as any type of bias? And if so, take that out or replace it with something else. So how can I ensure that I'm reducing my likelihood of appeals? And I'll tell you that talking to coaches over the last a lot of years, one of the biggest stresses that they go through at Canada Games, they'll say is like their selection process and they've had to go through all these appeals and it was very upsetting and it's hard on the athletes. And so what we want to do is try and support you to put in place a process that reduces the chance that you'll run into that. Still, for sure, could happen even with an awesome selection process, but we want to try and reduce the chance. So my advice to you guys is to do something that has a mix. So when you're looking at your selection protocol, having a scorecard, and Francois talked about a scorecard, and I'll give you another really quick example that we'll share with you with a scorecard approach. But having a scorecard that builds in a little bit of quantifiable measures, qualitative measures, and something that shows the mix of both. what's going to be up to you guys is to figure out what is the most important. So what's the balance there? What does that look like? And again, how are you measuring, and how are you measuring some of the pieces that may be qualitative, and how are you comparing two athletes? Like, how are you comparing two athletes' coachability, for example? That one can be a little tougher. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just give a couple minutes. I'm not going to play too much of this video, but I'll share the full video with you. This is only an 8-minute video, but I'm going to share just like 2 minutes of it. And this is Marika Nell. So she is a technical director at Tennis Nova Scotia, and she created for her 2017 Canada Games team. They did a selection card using a mixed approach. You'll notice on this, like I might have done some of the mixes and whatnot, the numbers a little bit differently, but the approach is really a good example to look at and go, oh, okay, this is a scorecard that demonstrates a mix of qualitative, quantitative, and it gave numbers to the qualitative aspects. So I just want you to see structurally how this was created. Close this other video. Hold on. Okay.
I'm going to bring to you a little explanation of how we did our Canada Games team selections in 2017. The main piece of advice that had been given to us, myself and the assistant coach manager, was to set out criteria that are as objective as possible. As little as possible of anybody's opinion or soft criteria that wasn't clear. So, to be super clear about your selection criteria and how you get to that, we set up an actual scorecard that counted out of 100 points for several reasons. One of the main reasons at the time was the culture in tennis. I think this exists in other sports as well, where our tennis players have a bit of a loser mentality when they draw opponents from the 4 big provinces in tennis, which are the same as in some of the other sports. So Alberta, Quebec, BC, and Ontario. When our players go to nationals and they draw a player from one of those provinces, they almost automatically give up. So to address that attitude and that whole mentality, we realized it was important for us to get the buy-in from the parents as well. So we sat them all down, we first devised the scorecard, then we had a meeting before the last 2 phases of our selection process started. We divided it up into 2 periods of time. Sat the parents down and said, this is how it's going to work. I was their head coach at the time. I wanted to emphasize resilience and team player mentality. Tennis isn't really a team sport. It's a very individual sport, but you need for this event team player mentality. So we came up with a way how to integrate that into the scorecard. Okay, so it was important for the parents to hear that because they're soft in the way they raise their kids sometimes, how they make excuses for them when they lose or when they have injuries. That's one of my pet peeves, 2 of my pet peeves. When the parents help to excuse losses or why the player underperformed, number 1, and number 2, injuries, because it's such a backdoor. Okay, so we built all of that into the scorecard. Some of the criteria that's hard to quantify, you have to put to numbers. It really helped us to make it this black and white. There it is, 100 points, and they're made up like that. Ranking and results, which in the past were the main criteria, were only worth 15 out of 100 points. They're still there, but they're underemphasized because attendance, showing up to all the training camps and sessions was pointless for us to try and build a team if everybody wasn't there. So attendance to training sessions, camps, tournaments even were built in there. And then the resilience factor and this team player or doubles, which in tennis is hard to measure.
Okay. So as you guys see, there's like a whole 5 minutes more, and I will share this with you after. Whoa, go back. I will share the whole video if you want to watch the full video and go through it. What I wanted to highlight there though was, like I said, the scorecard. So she demonstrated what the scorecard looked like. A couple interesting comments about how in the past, it was actually the results that were the main criteria to make the team. And this time they seriously flipped that. So they had it as only 15%, which is very interesting. They had something like attendance was 45. So you can see that you can use the scorecard like this to shape behavior. So it's shaping what they wanted to see. And for this team, they wanted to see high resiliency and someone that shows up. So they measured attendance and resiliency, more so than some of the other things. So in my opinion, it doesn't matter what you guys choose in the end, but it's how you want the behavior to be. And then what you put in is going to shape that behavior. So just thinking about that now, nice and early as you're putting together your selection criteria. Okay. So what about the timing of selection? So the earlier the better. That didn't come out how I wanted to be. I don't mean select your team now. If you select your team now, you may not get the best athletes. The earlier the better is starting the process. So starting to get your criteria put together now, starting to draft it. Hopefully, if you don't already have assistant coaches, or maybe some of you are assistant coaches, like getting the full coaching team together as quick as you can. So maybe encouraging that PSO, like let's name our coaching staff now so that the coaching staff can work together right now on that selection criteria and decide what kind of team do we want? What kind of athletes do we want? How are we going to shape that and get what we want by creating a super solid selection process? How long is that process going to be? And that's where I recommend the longest process that you can. There are times when team selection has to be late. So, there are examples where the timing doesn't work well and you kind of name a late team. And I'll just say sometimes that works and you get the hottest athletes at the time, but it often isn't great. And listening to Francois, you want to build depth and you want to have a look at athletes and really understand who and what they are. So the longer time that you have to work with them from now until the games, the better. So starting to think about now, how can you start to see some of the potential athletes for 2025? Get in front of them, coach their team this summer, like starting to have an eye out there on what the athletes look like, starting to get to know them, to build relationships, and starting to, again, understand what is it that I want and how am I going to get that through this team selection. As far as making final cuts, I mean, that kind of timing is really dependent on your yearly training plan and looking at when are the games, when is a good event prior to the games to sort of test the team and test those last athletes. So I'll say there's no one size fits all answer to like, when should I make my final cut? I don't know. That's going to depend on what your year looks like. But you can say that starting now to sort of look at athletes is a great best practice. Something to also start looking at now as you put together your selection protocol, and this one sometimes gets missed, so it's why I want to bring it up, is alternates. So will you name alternates at all? Will you name stay-at-home alternates versus traveling alternates? So let me know if anyone has a question on that, but like traveling athlete alternates will go to the games and stay maybe off-site and may not get to go to the games as normally the case, versus like alternates that are named and stay at home and may only get switched on to the team if there's, say, an injury 2 weeks out, with enough time to make the switch, because Canada Games has a lot of pretty strict things that have to happen. But I just starting to think about, if you're going to name alternates, what is their role from when you name, say, a core team until the games? How do you keep them motivated? Being an alternate is a super tough role. So I've often seen selection protocols that name their team, say, 3 months out with a couple alternates. What are you doing with those alternates in those last 3 months? Excuse me. So do they have a chance to make the team if there is an injury? And if so, how are you ensuring that they're motivated and still having fun and staying in the sport? So we want the best we can for all the athletes. Don't forget about your alternates. Being clear on the expectation for those athletes as well, because like I said, it's the toughest spot. It's like you've almost made the team, but you didn't make the team. So how do you support those athletes and give them a positive experience as well? And then my last point on selection process itself, is the communication of decisions. So this can also be a sticking point that I've gotten a lot of phone calls on around Canada Games is, oh, I made my final cut, or I cut to whatever. I made one of my cuts and I'm hearing from parents and they're angry and this, that, and the other thing. So what I'll say is starting to think about now is ensuring the selection process is done and handled as early as possible. So getting the selection document out as soon as you can, out into the public, into the hands of parents. Like Marika spoke a lot about the parents. Getting that group to understand the process will help you. Getting the athletes to understand it. And when communicating, having a plan, so not just throwing these documents out randomly, like really thinking about the timing, how and when it's going out, who is it getting to? You probably don't know your entire sports community in your entire province. I mean, maybe you do. That'd be awesome. But if you don't, how are you reaching as many people as you can? So who needs to help? You know, the PSO and others. You need lots of others to reach as many athletes as you can so that you're seen as communicating the opportunity of Canada Games and the opportunity to fit in the selection process to as many people as you can. And then being consistent with the treatment of athletes. So is it all face-to-face that you're doing the communication and making these decisions? Is it always via email? Is it on, I don't know, some other thing? So making sure that there's some consistency there. And then when you get to the point of cuts, it's going to be emotional for all involved. So another best practice for any team, provincials, Canada Games, whatever, implementing now, if you don't already, have a 24-hour period before contacting coaches. So if any of you online don't have that in place right now, it's really a best practice. So it's a 24-hour cooling off period where the parents are asked to not contact the coach for 24 hours after the decision is made. And that is like literally a cooling off period. It gives time for heads to become level, for people to kind of the emotions to reduce, and it gives time for the coach to think about things, but more importantly for the parents to think about what they're going to respond before they respond, and hopefully kind of come off the ledge a bit before they respond to whatever has upset them. So that was a lot of talking from me. So I'm just going to ask that we do a real short share. So either in the chat or again, this is a small group. If you feel comfortable, you can unmute and talk. Does anyone have anything from a past selection process that they feel worked really well? So either provincial team, doesn't matter, your club team, Canada Games team would be great, but any of your teams. And if there's past Canada Games coaches on the line, how far out did you start your selection process last time? And I said informally or formally because, you know, sometimes you could like start IDing athletes informally before you put out the official document. That's fine. I'm curious on both. So I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to unmute or drop some stuff in the chat there. We'll learn from each other. Anyone want to share? Hey, Lynn, are you going to share?
Sure.
Yay.
The last set of games was a little different because we were supposed to be in 2021.
Yep.
And then that's
Right.
not going till 2022, kind of changed things up. So we had started our process in that summer of 2020 when the COVID hit.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
2020, everything shut down. So that summer of 2020, we were in the selection process mode, but I mean, at that point, we all knew that we were probably not going to go to Canada Games in 2021. But I hadn't always started that far out, so it was quite interesting to be able to do that. So it kind of made you go, okay, it was good to start that, and that at that point, that was 2 years out. That was a 24 mark. But funny enough, for 2022, probably picked we were not able to pick our team until early June of 2022 because of the lack of competition.
Yes,
In beach
that final
volleyball
cut.
with beach volleyball with only 2 players, it's probably not as big of a deal that we were so late, but it was interesting that I totally changed my process because of what COVID did, and moving forward, if I was coaching again this round, I would use some of the similar timelines.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that. That's awesome. Anyone else want to share? I can quickly share with my, oh, Jose, you want to share?
Hello, yeah. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, so we diving participate with just one diver to the last Canada Games. So our proceeds to get the selection. It was a little simple for Newfoundland because our sport is like starting building again, right? So we are building new athletes. We pick one of the athletes from the novice level to represent Canada Games. So so our selection was really easy for him. So because was the only one, and normally we select 2 athletes per event, but consider that we had just one. We pick him, and just we did like know the quantity like numbers to like one score to get the minimum required to compete.
Yep.
Just we request to him is to get the diving list, the 5 diving each group per event. So he competed in 2 events, 1 meter and 3 meter.
Yep.
And he competed, so he full finish his diving list, and he was able to compete. That was so simple.
Good.
So yes, that's what I want to share.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll quickly share for you guys. The year I was involved in softball, it was a full 2 season out selection, and that did work very well. So from a team sport selection process, we had the core team the summer prior to the games, and that told us a lot. That really showed us a lot about those athletes. And so it was really nice. And then we rode the final. We rode a pretty big group out until fairly close to the games when we made the final cut. Snowboard individual sport you'd think would be a little different, but it's the same process. So same thing, we would always try and do at least an 18-month out selection process so that we would be naming, if not a formal core team, at least a group that we were looking at 2 full winters out from the games so that you can monitor the team the year out from the games and sort of get to know the athletes and then work on them closer too. So we're going to dive into a little bit more on the planning side of that and like why. Whoops, sorry, I just lost I keep losing my cursor. Okay. So planning priorities. So yearly training plan. So what I'll start with is if you're on here as a coach and you haven't yet learned how to do a yearly training plan, we run into coaches all the time who haven't, and you haven't taken the performance planning module yet, now is a great time to do it. So don't wait. If this is on your list of courses to do, I recommend bumping it way up the priority list. And you'll see why after we chat. But basically, get on that now. You probably require doing it for the games already. If you haven't done it, do it now because you're going to use it from now until the games. If you're in Nova Scotia and you don't have it yet, there's one coming up March 20, 21, 25th, 26th. It's 4 nights. So sign up for that. And then if you're in New Brunswick, there's one running March 12th, 19th, 26th. So they're doing theirs over 3 instead of 4 days. PEI, maybe Lynn, if you have one coming up, if you want to throw it in the chat. And Newfoundland, I didn't see one listed, but reach out to your provincial representative if you're looking for the course. That's kind of your starting point if you haven't done a yearly training plan before. For those of you, I'm going to make the assumption as we go through this next part that you have and you do have a yearly training plan. So if you don't panic. It's fine. But yeah, I just want to talk about kind of where would you be right now? So we would expect right now that you'd be moving into your preparation or pre-competitive phase, depending on your sport. Everybody's prep phase and pre-competitive phase is a little bit different. So you're moving into one of those because you're summer sports. So you're coming into your summer. And hopefully you already know you're approximately 550 days to the games. So you could even right now do a YTP that goes from now all the way to the games. So you could do like an 18-month out YTP. But just talking about this year's at least, from now until whenever your season's over, what should you be focusing on? The big thing you want to be focusing on this year is making notes on how to change next year's YTP. So this is your year to make scribbles, to try things and track what's going on in that YTP. So this is the season, the summer, to figure out what's working well and what needs to change for next time. And that's where, like, ideally you're involved with a team in your sport this summer that's maybe similar athletes so that you can test out this YTP. So I really hope most of you are at least coaching a group this summer that you can do some of these tests on, but figuring out and thinking to the games next summer and going, okay, what parts of this are working? When I hit, say, nationals this year or Atlantics, are my athletes burnt out this summer? If they are, why? What can I change next year to ensure that this same time, so Canada Games time, that my athletes are at their best? Did I come in and my athletes at this year's final event, were they dragging themselves? Did they not eat properly? It's fine. This is the year to make mistakes. So this is the year to fail. This is the year to learn. So great if you find some of those. Oh, my athletes were, they didn't eat well. They were dragging themselves. All good. Let's see what we can do to line things up better and make changes between now and next year to make the best athletes that we can. So I actually get excited by figuring out some of these mistakes during this year, the year before the games, in order to make changes. I get excited even after the games when I find mistakes, and then I can change it for the 4 years after that. But I'm a little into it. But trying for yourself to find these things now. So what are you probably doing over the next couple months? You can do periods of high volume, fluctuations in intensity of the skill being taught, and you can put quite a bit of load on the athletes because this is not the Canada Games year. So this is an exciting time. So thinking now about what happens over the summer holidays, how long do you need to be with them? How long can they maintain their strength if you're going to take some time away from them this summer? And when can you start again? So when are you back with your athletes again? Then this next slide is one that you can use as a bit of a snapshot to keep looking back between your plan and what's going on. So the time you're in right now is the opportunity to make major strength gains. You're still well out of the games, so you have lots of time. Well, not lots of time. You have time to make major strength gains for those athletes. You still have enough time to change physiology. You can make technical changes in their abilities. You can learn to apply new mental strategies. So if you flip all these, if you go, I'm going to wait 6 or 8 months to start working with my athletes, these opportunities aren't going to be there the same. So just remember that this is the opportunity to do these things because you're 18 months out. As we get closer to the games, you're not going to be able to change physiology. You will run out of time. The athletes cannot change their bodies that quickly. You will not have the same impact on technical changes. You shouldn't be teaching new mental strategies like, right before the games. So starting to think now about how can I maximize the opportunity of time? What you have right now is time. So what are some of the things that you could be focusing on? Getting the athletes to learn new things. This is a great time for them to learn all kinds of new things. It's a time to get them implementing new systems. So any of my team sport, I see volleyball, I see softball, I see basketball. This is a time to implement new systems. So teaching them new systems and how to move on the field differently and work as a team. And this is a time to build the base. So this is when you want your athletes coming in and learning to build the base physically, mentally, and relationships with you and each other. So, what are they doing in the gym, doing basic strength building? Are they learning new mental strategies? And then the nutrition piece, you have a little more flexibility with, like, there's a great time to just teach them how to eat well. And then you can get into some more specifics later on in your plan. But basically just teaching them lots of new things. So hopefully you have access to your athletes. We only have about 9 minutes, so and I am almost through the slides, so don't worry. But I'm just going to quickly touch on the little bit of building successful teams, and we'll get into this a little more in our next session. But starting to think as well, so I won't get to chat with most of you for another 6 months. So over the next 6 months, what do I hope? I hope you've put your selection process in place. I hope you're working on the final selection protocol. You've got your coaches, your assistants or others named. And then you're starting to think about how to build the actual team, the team that'll be your Canada Games team. So a couple things to think about between now and then. How are you building trust? So a great practice is to think to think of trust as fundamental to all the other things. If you don't have trust, you're not going to get performance. So how can you build trust with all the athletes in the whole selection process, even the ones you're going to cut? How do you build trust? Building trust with the coaches, both your assistant coaches or others, and the coaches of maybe clubs and whatnot, and the parents. I threw up a copy of, or a picture of The Speed of Trust. It's a really good book by Stephen Covey. If you haven't read it, it's a good one to read. Again, you have time on your side. It's a good one to read, and it gets into some of these, how do you build trust? What's the structure of trust? How is it done and built? So there's one fun reading for you. It's also a great time over the next 6 months to start creating your team vision and values. It's great to do that with the athletes. So this is like, once you get a group, getting that group to sit together and start to think about what is the vision for that group and the team shared values. And those come out of teenagers pretty well. So that's a fun exercise that we can talk about more another time. And starting to share your coaching philosophy with everyone involved. So if you haven't looked at yours, refreshed yours, or haven't even created one, starting to sit down and create a 1 or 2 liner that explains what you're here for as a Canada Games coach, and what you want to get out of this experience as a coach, and have the team leave, like, what's the feeling that you want that team leaving the games with. Starting to shape that now for yourself, and then starting to share it with the group. The earlier, the better. The earlier that's shared, the better, because everyone will understand where you're coming from. Just in the interest of time, we're going to skip that one. So I'm just going to kind of wrap us up with a few things. Resources. So where you will find this recording when we are finished uploading it is on our YouTube page. So this is a direct link to our YouTube. I will send out the slides so you'll have this. But this YouTube channel also has, you can go under, we have like different sections. You can go under mental performance. You can go under nutrition and see our past webinars. There's a ton of them on there now. See our past webinars in a bunch of these areas. So if you're listening today and you're a little more curious about any given topic, take a look at the YouTube. Like, we've spent years now building this up with resources from across really the world with different speakers. So go take a look at that and see if there's anything that could potentially help you. You also have as a resource your provincial coaching representative. So Lynn spoke just now. And you have others on the line here. So reaching out to them if you need help, reaching out to us if you need help. And then the last one, the NCCP e-learning bank. So a whole lot of that e-learning is free. So taking a look, I showed you on the first slide, under your profile, how to go into the e-learning. Take a look at what's there. NCCP has put out a ton of new ones in the last few years. So, look all the time, because even when I go on, there's new ones there. So take a look at that if you're looking for information on anything. And then the last thing I'm going to ask you guys to do, we're going to throw this up. There you go. Can you see? Whoa, that's wild. Okay. Can you guys see the Menti up there now? I can't see you now. Allison, can you guys see the Menti?
It's flashing in and out, Natasha.
Yeah.
And now it just disappeared.
There, I see. Is there anything you hope we can cover in September?
Yeah. Okay. So what you guys should be able to do, and you can even bring this up on your phone and then leave the session if you have to. But what I'm going to ask is you go to menti.com and put in the code that's at the top here, 8450-4845. And it'll bring up this Menti, and there's a few slides that I will click through in the next few minutes, and you can do it on your own on your phone, like I said. And I'm just looking for if there's anything you hope we cover in September, or anything that we didn't cover today that you wish we did. So again, we're going to come back online in 6 months. We're going to have another chat. So I want you to feel that you've left September and today, but getting the information that you're looking for. So if you're curious about things, if you're struggling with things, reach out and let me know so that we can build September to meet your needs. And in the in-betweens, we probably have resources and different things that we can help you with. So making sure that we get everything that you want out of it. I'm just going to stop sharing for a sec. And then what we'll do, oh no, just a sec, whew, I almost ended it. What I'd like to do is open it up if there's any questions. Allison, you can probably stop the recording there. But open it up if there's any questions, and then we will chat with you guys